Hi and welcome to another narration presented by yours truly, Cryptids Roost. Let's just take a moment's silence for all the haters, Karens and the trolls. That's enough. Be sure to check out the blooper reel at the end of the video, which is then followed by the end screen where you will find more videos listed. So grab your coffee, sit back and enjoy the show. And don't forget, where fear is, happiness is not. Void Operator Part 1, Into the Dark. This awesome series is written by Cecily 1987.
Author's note: my homage to classic sci-fi shooter games like Doom, Quake, Metroid, System Shock. One badass against overwhelming odds. Says, a sudden reality ripping flash of multicoloured lighting sparked across reality, frying the ceiling and surrounding cargo containers of the dark loading bay. Out of the burning bright light, a physical form forcefully manifested. A live human body floating 10 feet off the ground, face and chest almost skimming the scorched ceiling. Gravity instantly took a hold of the new intruder that had blinked into existence and began to pull it to the deck below. The nimble warrior quickly spun to land lightly on its toes with all the deadly grace of a jungle cat. A smaller flash followed at the same moment. The figure darted for cover. This burst of light was way less intense than the one that bore him into existence, only manifesting some sort of compact tactical rifle in the warrior's hands as it skidded up against the smoking cargo container. The warrior scanned the large room with its weapon. Within an instant of it appearing out of thin air, it had already taken cover and tactically evaluated its surroundings for possible threats. A few tense seconds of agonizing silence passed as the black figure slowly scanned the darkly lit environment. Smoke and steam created by the heat of the unbound teleportation finally began to dissipate, and the temperature began to return to the frigid environment familiar to a deep space vessel. The room is clear, Vanta. The solid black figure finally straightened up and stepped out from behind cover, slightly angling its weapon downwards. A flickering light on the ceiling tried its best to illuminate the mysterious warrior, but all the light seemed to be absorbed by whatever dark material the warrior's armour was made out of. A darkness blacker than black was the phrase most often used by terrified combatants when describing an encounter with an elite void operative. The statement was an apt description of the warrior's Stygian battlesuit. Every nanoparticle of the suit was specifically coloured, or lack thereof, to absorb all spectrum of light and show no seam or detail on the armour's surface, making the warrior darker than the natural shadows around it, like a miniature black hole appearing in the shape of a human, but just as destructive. Speaking of the form of the warrior, details were impossible to make out on the subject by design. Its form was all smooth, featureless black, with a slightly widened and elongated head that was a helmet of some sort. There was no bulkiness or cumbersome equipment breaking up the slim silhouette of the figure. Only because of this streamlined design could you tell the warrior was female. Tall, muscled, but curvy enough to clearly tell. Even though Vanta never really considered herself a female, not truly. The AI in her head was coded male, and it was as much a part of her as she was. Most of the time she was referred to by her rank, unit number, or call sign. But she didn't disagree with anyone addressing her as a female. Run scans for nearby personnel. Vanta spoke deeply to herself, muffled in her throat like a ventriloquist. She was quiet enough to make no sound through her eerie black armour, but provided enough tonal vibrations for her neuro-implanted AI to understand her and run her commands through her suit's software. "Strange," replied the monotone male voice in her head. "Life signs are scattered. No, inconclusive. There are both more and less than there should be on this ship." Clarify," Vanta commanded her AI with a tinge of frustration. It was unlike the AI to be so cryptic. Something was definitely off. "Vanta, there should be only 50 to 70 crewmen on board such a vessel as this, but I detect hundreds." "Impossible!" Vanta spoke aloud as she raised her weapon and approached the nearest doorway. Her weapon also resembled her armour in the same way it was as black as the void. The rifle was roughly in the shape of a long, thin rectangle with no discernible grooves or markings. Only the sensors inside Vanta's Stygian battlesuit allowed her to see the many buttons and switches on the weapon. Also, the short-range teleportation modifications inside the weapon made it highly customizable in nature and adaptable in a variety of combat situations. "Send another ping out for Captain Lux on an encrypted frequency," Vanta said as she manually pulled the doorway's seal open. The ship had gone into emergency mode and cut power to non-essentials like doors and most lights. She had to sling her rectangular rifle over her shoulder to pull against the door that was sealed airtight from the rest of the ship. But the nanoparticles from her suit instinctively integrated into her muscle groups in her body she was straining the most to amplify them, along with anchoring, magnetizing her feet to the deck and anchoring her. With a loud pop, she wrenched the door open. Air from the larger portion of the ship flooded in with a blast of wind. Immediately, Vanta saw a dense fog of particles being carried in with a sudden vacuum. "Warning, hazardous material detected," warned, and Vanta jumped back from the door. The blast of wind engulfed her, and her suit tried desperately to identify what sort of hazardous particles were floating in the fog. "What is it, "I'm not reading any damage to the exterior of my suit," Vanta said, as she tried to brush away the shiny particles that danced around her. "Again, that's what's infuriating," answered the voice of the AI. "These unidentified molecules don't match anything, and at the same time match everything. Do you need me to run an emergency debug of your system?" Vanta chided, only halfway serious as she stepped out into the unlit hallway. Red emergency lights illuminated the swirling mystery dust to create an ominous glowing fog. "The dust registers as biological, but also carries traces of electrical currents, similar to nanobots. Tracking the minuscule pieces that have landed on your suit shows they are moving, almost like they are searching for an opening in your armour." "Some sort of new nano-weapon being developed by the Sovereign Workers' Party?" Vanta suggested. "Unlikely. Reports say the SWA's technology is nowhere close to keeping up with our nanotech. And whatever this mystery substance is, it's even above our pay grade." There was a moment as considered further. "Besides, even if it was the SWA, how did they deploy it aboard one of our deep-cover stealth spacecrafts?" Vanta continued down the hexagonal hallways, knowing the question was redundant. Was working through his confusion while also keeping her up to speed on his thought process. The corridor took a right and went further down to a T-junction. Vanta slowly sliced the doorway until she was clear of any immediate danger. As she approached it, she could see it was the body of a female shipmate, lying face down with her arm covering her face. ID implant reads this is Ensign Kara Sawyer. The rest of her file has been classified, Ohm informed. Like I said before, life signs are all over the place. She reads as both living and dead. I suggest you manually check. Vanta calmly bent over beside the ensign to roll her over to look at her. As she did, she was surprised to see the ensign was alive, but half of her face was burnt and her eyes were grey, the same pale grey as the girl on Taurus 9. What? Vanta stuttered, one of the few times she was ever lost for words. I hate you, the girl spat. The word hate felt like it cracked Vanta in the skull with a brick. Vanta fell back and quickly tried to recover. Ohm, medicate! May I ask why? Ohm replied. But Vanta already saw what the confusion was about. There was no little girl from Taurus 9, only a woman missing both eyes and a tongue, which was still strange in its own right. Vanta got up slowly, keeping her eyes on the corpse. She noticed the ensign had a bloody death grip on something in her hand. It was eyeball gore and pieces of her tongue. What madness was this? Ohm, are you sure there is nothing else you can tell me about our mission? You know the protocols. To protect mission secrecy and integrity, I can only relay further objectives to you as the initial objectives are met. All we know is the ship stopped responding and we need to find the captain to find out why. Fine, Vanta said as she turned away from the body and continued down the passage. She would have to remember to schedule a psychological assessment to maintain a mission readiness as soon as she got back home base. Vanta approached the T-junction slowly but stopped before stepping out into it. She got a sudden feeling of foreboding danger pressed down all around her. This sense of danger was from her gut, not from Ohm or any fancy sensor in her suit. It was just good old instincts from millions of years of evolution, and it never led her wrong. What's the hold-up? Ohm asked. Vanta waited in the middle of the passageway, eyes darting left and right, expecting enemies to emerge from both directions. She could feel the subtle vibrations of the ship's engines under her feet, and observed the alien particles drifting lazily around her. In her experience, the world always seemed too calm before it exploded into violence. Ohm, Vanta spoke, barely above a whisper. Try to ping Captain Lux again. Of course, I'll give it another go, Ohm chirped back, almost glad to hear her speak again. Last time the readings came back inconclusive. I will open the search parameters for any onboard personnel this time. V! Ohm shouted in her head, interrupting his own train of thought. Hostiles close! Danger imminent! The optics in Vanta's helmet lit up her vision with multiple red targets approaching fast from both the right and left of the T-junction. She saw they had all been pinged as ship personnel, but were approaching her fast and were almost on top of her. She supposed they were going to shoot first and ask questions later. She wondered how the crew had been alerted to her presence. She must have tripped some sort of alarm when she teleported into the hangar. Vanta leapt halfway back down the corridor and raised her weapon. Hopefully she could speak to the crewmates before they fired upon her. She knew her shadow-like appearance was meant to cause fear, so that wouldn't help. She switched her rifle to non-lethal. 2 armoured marines came around the left and 1 around the right. Instantly, Vanta knew something was off. The 2 on the left wore the dark grey uniforms of interstellar conglomerates, while the one on the right wore the reddish uniform of IC's bitter rivals, the SWA. "Void dog!" screamed the red uniformed man with no fear in his expression, just unbridled rage. The marine next to him began to unsling his rifle from his shoulder, and the third began to charge Vanta with a gurgling scream. Vanta prioritised the threats and fired past the charging marine to nail the second armed marine before he could fully bring his weapon to bear. The shock round let out an angry zap, and the headshot should have dropped the marine to the deck, but something unexpectedly horrible happened. The skin on the marine's shaved head reacted to the pain as if it was its own unique standalone entity.
The marine's face and scalp quivered violently and tore itself off the marine's skull face to wetly slap against the nearby wall. This left the marine still raising his weapon with his naked, blood-drenched skull and crazed, bulging eyes, now screaming at him. Vanta only had a split second to register what was happening, as her muscle memory reacted to the first marine only inches from her. By using the full force of her hips to perform a devastating sweeping kick to the charging marine's midsection. Being a void operator usually meant you worked alone. 95% of Vanta's work had been done with just her and Ohm tagging along in her head. The ops were always deniable and backup was never coming, so you had to get good at improvising. With the slightest adjustment before her kick landed, she hit the charging marine with enough force to launch him backwards into the skull-faced marine. The 2 marines tumbled to the deck as Skullface's rifle showered the hallway with ricochet rounds. Now the only threat standing was the SWA soldier. The veins in his neck and head popped as he screamed at Vanta. There was a black handle of some sort that was sticking up through the chest of a thick tactical vest the soldier wore. The soldier grabbed the handle with both hands and tried to pull it up and out of the vest to no avail. The SWA soldier just screamed and screamed as he pulled at the protruding handle and stumbled towards Vanta. "Seems their mental faculties have been severely diminished," Ohm quipped, as Vanta thumbed a hidden button on her weapon to switch back to her default lethal rounds setting. She had no problems with killing SWA. They were the enemy. Besides that, these marines couldn't be called allies anymore either. That's the least of their problems. I'm gonna put them all down like rabid dogs. The furious SWA soldier was only 2 meters away from Vanta, still fervently tugging on the hilt of whatever it was protruding from the front of his vest, when there was a horrid crack of the trooper's ribcage snapping apart, and his chest exploding open with a sickening, wet crack. The trooper revealed the handle to be the hilt of some sort of wicked, blackened sword buried inside of his living flesh. When he pulled it out, he dissected himself vertically from throat to belly button, upwards to his neck. His ribs cracking open like some sort of awful reverse bear trap or opening mouth of broken teeth. As the sword was ripped free to swing in the air above the trooper's head, black blood and viscera flung out towards Vanta, similar to an octopus shooting ink to disorientate an attacker. Vanta also noticed the unnatural way the multiple severed ends of the gutted thing's intestines shot out to try to ensnare her. Monsters, Vanta thought. How did they come to exist here? What mad science had the enemy released upon the interstellar conglomerate? She compressed the trigger of her rifle, full auto, as the tendrils-like intestines of the gutted man tried to wrap around her arms and weapon. 45 round hollow point at 13 rounds a second thumped rapidly into the trooper's exposed innards, pushing it backwards and turning it into mulch. But still the deformed body persisted as the mutilated intestines lashed out in further defiance of the barrage of bullets and pulled its body closer. The berserking thing was close enough to swing down with its sword with both hands. Vanta, confident of the toughness of her Stygian battlesuit, lifted her right hand to swat the sword away. To her painful surprise, the strange sword easily chipped through her armour and dug into her elbow. Vanta grunted, more surprised than in pain, and she rotated her elbow and hips to redirect the sword strike to glance off the wall beside her. Her armour was made to withstand small caliber fire from point blank and take the impact from dangerous debris in the vacuum of space. What sort of metal cuts through nanotech so quickly? If she didn't redirect the energy of the monster's vicious overhand chop as quick as she did, the mutilated thing could have lopped off her arm. Quickly the battlesuit had already closed back over the wounded elbow and was mended the lacerated flesh underneath. All she had to do was get free of its tentacle intestines. Vanta grew tired of being taken by surprise, and being on the back foot as the thing slammed her into the right wall and then into the left. Vanta just growled and tried to remain on her feet. Her right hand was still burning from the healing process, while she concentrated on just keeping a firm grip on her rifle. With her left hand, she extended her fingers and thumb straight out to make a knife hand. Her suit responded to the physical cue by giving her a literal knife hand. The nano armour running from her elbow, wrist to a pinky finger sharpened to a cutting edge. The fingertips also fused together at the ends to give her a sharp stabbing point. This was a manoeuvre Vanta had performed many times in her Stygian battlesuit of close combat situations, and the dark blade formed in a fraction of a second. It was all predicting what she wanted and notifying the suit before she even asked for it. The AI and human had an extensive work history together. With her knife hand sharpened to a fine edge, she lashed out and severed the intestines, grabbing her. A second strike almost decapitated the ghoulish thing, causing its head to lop off backwards. Vanta retreated back as far as she could, her back to the wall. The headless freak still lumbering forward, and the two marines were back on their feet and ready to fight. But she had enough time to get enough space to enact her next move. Special ordnance, plasma shells. Fine choice, came the satisfied reply as began to teleport in the large shells Vanta needed. Though this ammo was so large it couldn't be teleported directly into Vanta's Mockingbird rifle. She would have to manually load them. Vanta held out her left hand, and with a rainbow flash, 2 black shells appeared in her hand. Though plasma shells resembled the ammo of its low-tech relative, this plasma shell actually had quite a bit of science packed into its unassuming package. The back half of the shell was a bunch of techno-wizardry that Vanta never cared to understand, but knew it was pretty expensive. The front half of the shell was filled with a blue viscous substance that would spray out the barrel of her weapon and burn through virtually everything it touched with the heat of the sun. And even though it supposedly fired plasma, that's not really what it was. The first plasma shells did shoot honest to God superheated plasma and were incredibly dangerous. The plasma could burn hot through everything for hours. This was unacceptable during shipborne combat. Now the new shells were loaded with a military engineered synthetic plasma that evaporated into vapour within 4 to 6 seconds. But it was a truly devastating 4 to 6 seconds for anything drenched with the spray. Now these corrupted marines were about to experience its effect firsthand. Vanta crouched down and using her still healing right arm to stabilise her weapon over her right knee, she thumbed an invisible button only she could see through the helmet's visor and popped open a loading port big enough for the plasma shells. She quickly slid both shells home and lifted her weapon to fire. The bisected berserker had been doing its own type of healing during their brief reprieve. Its bizarrely long intestines kept flowing out of its gut to twist up and around the outside of its body. The snake-like intestines endlessly crisscrossed and wrapped the body back together tightly, even going up to the neck and pulling the head back down to sit stiffly atop its neck. Vanta had had enough of the abomination and pulled the trigger with a reverberating discharge. Burning hot blue umbrellaed outwards in a tight circle to engulf the majority of the intestines monster's upper half. The blue plasma hit the target with such ferocity that it sheared through its body mass like dry kindling put to a blowtorch. In an instant, the standing threat was scorched out of existence in a burning blue tide. What was left of the soldier's bottom half dropped to the deck, burning rapidly from the plasma. The dangerous black sword clattered off the metal ground and seemed unaffected by the burning heat. Vanta quickly re-evaluated the threats in the hallway and readied herself again by ejecting the spent shell. The smoking shell shot out with a blast of exhaust to roll around on the grate flooring below her. All this seemed like slow motion to her as her senses took in everything around her. The split seconds seemed like hours as she watched the two Marines begin to make their move. She had to be both patient and quick to pull off her next shot. Finally, the Skull Marine further back fired his weapon as the other made a desperate lunge for her. She slid to the wall, putting the charging Marine between her and the incoming gunfire. The firing Marine didn't stop firing his weapon and shot his comrade in the back, propelling him forward even faster. Vanta lined up both targets in front of one another and let out the second blast of plasma shotgun, taking down both Marines with a satisfying thump. The lead Marine was only inches away before the shot went off, and his melted remains were propelled backwards to smash into the armed Marine standing close behind him. The second Marine fell to the ground, thrashing and struggling as the blue melted bits of its ally burned away on top of him. The Marine's skull opened and closed its mouth in a silent scream. It obviously didn't have the robustness of the bisected SWA soldier, and looked to be circling the drain from the plasma blast. The weirdest thing was how it wasn't screaming as it melted away. Neither of them did. They were just completely silent the whole time. But she had seen the looks on their faces before. It wasn't outwardly cold stare, but their eyes contained a dark burning fire. It was loathing. Vanta had seen similar looks before in the eyes of an extremist group she had dealt with a few years back, when they attempted to genocide an entire orbital colony near Phobos. Decades of pent-up hate and religious fervour finally let loose on the population they perceived as their oppressors. It was a bloodbath. 50 heavily armed insurgents stormed the Phobos luxury condo, which served as semi-permanent housing for the wealthy executives and family of Mars' Geo Group. Vanta remembered the bomb-tied madmen pumped up with drugs, already a dead man in their own minds. All they wanted was to cause their fellow man more death and pain before they ended their own wretched lives. "The children saw the look on your face too," a voice whispered in Vanta's ear. She spun around to check her 6, knowing she would have to revert to hand-to-hand combat until she switched back to another ammo type. Nobody was behind her, but she noticed the body from earlier, Ensign Sawyer, was gone. "Interesting," Holmes spoke up. "I did notice some maintenance panels open further back. Maybe that's where she skittered off to." Vanta ejected the spent plasma shells and reverted back to full auto 45 rounds. She walked over to Skullface and the other melted marine to put 2 rounds into what was left of their heads. She was going to make damn sure these two didn't get back up and slink away when she had her back turned. "Ideas?" Vanta asked as she walked over to check out the strange black sword. "About the sword or about this whole thing?" Ohm asked. "Both. I'll go with what I can answer sufficiently first," Ohm said. "The blade matches the material makeup of onyx, albeit a denser variant. It's extremely valuable and found around the core of Pluto, giving it the nickname Hades Steel." Vanta picked up the sword to find it was incredibly heavy. It was only a little over 2 feet, but weighed around 10 pounds according to her suit's sensors. "Something has sharpened the edge of this stone to a molecular level. No wonder it cut into your armour." "Affix it to my suit," Vanta said as she slung it over her shoulder. The nanoparticles in her suit gripping it tightly in place to stick securely to her back. "What about the ship?" "The ship has clearly been contaminated by some sort of unknown pathogen. Rather it be biological, nanomechanical, or, something unknown." "Do you think it could be something the SWA was researching? Maybe in an attempt to use it against us?" Vanta proposed, back to her AI. "By running with that hypothesis, it could explain why SWA soldiers were aboard a top-secret icy naval stealth ship. Perhaps some sort of battle took place here when the SWA somehow boarded the ship. Also, the SWA soldier seemed to show more advanced signs of infection. Perhaps he had been infected longer. But if it was an SWA weapon made to strengthen the SWA soldiers, why infect icy marines?" Vanta asked sharply. "Unless it takes control of their minds like a mind control, similar to the mass cerebral hacking during the Jupiter revolt." "I have no efficient counter-theory at this time, though some sort of mental manipulation could indeed be at play here. Though I believe the naval personnel on this ship are not authorized to have a high enough level of implants that could compromise them to being hacked by any outside agents. You and the captain should be the only high-value personnel with high levels of augmentics," said, before falling silent in her head. Vanta prowled down the tight hallways of the ship. It was hard to gauge the actual size of the ship due to the vessel being cloaked invisible when Vanta's interceptor ship attached to its hull. The ship was one of a kind and beyond top secret. Few other than the actual crew of the ship knew the specific layout and dimensions of the stealth craft, and the only way Vanta's ship found it was an emergency beacon sent out on a channel even fewer knew about. Only the captain of the ship could have sent out the beacon. Contact HQ. Check for updates or see if they have sent any follow-up orders. I sent them a request 30 seconds ago. Verified message received. Orders are still standing. Locate Captain Lux and await further instructions. Vanta felt an uncommon spike of anger and suppressed it before Ohm detected it. Vanta should have been used to the game by now. She was an elite operative for the IC, Interstellar Conglomerate, and usually she would be led around by the nose. Orders would only be given sparsely, drip-fed one at a time until completion of her mission. Vanta continued exploring the hexagonal hallways. Most IC ships were built with defense in mind. Either always and seconds of the ship could be locked down or sealed in case of hostile incursion or hull breach to the vacuum of space. But none of these lockdown procedures had been put into place. Every hallway was open and Vanta couldn't find any more of the ship's personnel. It seemed whatever attacked the ship took the ship's crew completely by surprise and bypassed all initial warnings. Vanta continued through the cramped, low-lit hallways when an augmented door to a bathroom opened to her left. Vanta turned to see a figure standing in the bathroom, but Vanta didn't speak out, because she knew what she saw could not be real. The girl she saw standing on the tiled floor had died years ago. Vanta had killed her. The girl stared at Vanta, her face beginning to frost over, her tears freezing. The girl's eyes began to bulge in her sockets as she convulsed in a silent scream. Vanta, is everything okay? Your pulse has spiked, Ohm inquired. Yes, I'm fine, Vanta said as the door to the bathroom closed, and she turned away from the reminder of a past nightmare. How much further? I'm picking up Captain Lux's personal ID tag not far from here. His vital signs are strange, like the 3 tangos you killed in the hallway back there. He may have mutated like they were. Regardless, let's find him and get some answers, Vanta said with grim determination. And I hope you all enjoy the blooper reel.
A live human body only manifesting some sort of Besides, even if the SWA, it was an eyeball gore and pieces. The optics in Vanta's helmet lit up her vision with multiple red targets approaching fast, both.
As Vanta thumbed a hidden button, as the sword was ripped free to swing, her armour was made to withstand small caliber fire. The front half of the shell was filled with... Fucking hell. Few other... Hey family, please be so kind as to throw punch the like button and smack the arse of the subscription button as well. And remember to chokehold that notification bell and then select all. That way you'll receive all notifications each time I upload a new video. And by subscribing, you'll be the first to see all of our new spooky creepypasta stories. A very big thank you to Sesley 1987 for allowing me to narrate this awesome series. Make sure to check out Sesley 1987's Reddit page for more brilliant stories as well. Also be sure to check out the Sesley 1987 playlist here for more of their stories that I may have already narrated. I would just like to say a very big thank you to all of the authors that I have worked with and all the ones that I will work with in the future. So thank you all, my brothers and sisters. And why not hashtag cryptidsroost in your comments. If you would like to support the channel and help make us grow, I have an account at buymeacoffee.com. You can buy me a coffee with your donations, big or small, to that site, or via paypal.me/cryptidsroost. You can also support us and buy me a coffee on Ko-Fi, which is an alternative to Patreon. I have also created a new account at BitChute. That is an alternative to YouTube. All relevant links will be below, but don't forget to check out the end screen, see above. That will also list some more videos in my back catalogue. Take care everyone, and I hope you all have a wonderful and peaceful night. And don't forget, where fear is, happiness is not.